The very end of Deuteronomy chapter 24 has some good news for anyone who has ever been overlooked, neglected, forgotten about, or maybe even never thought of. God is giving the Israelites some instructions on something in particular they're supposed to do as they're harvesting their fields. And as they're going out in the fields, he says, and as you're gathering all of your fruits and the things that you're going to take home and use to feed your family, if you overlook something and you leave it behind you, or if you drop something and leave it behind you, he said, leave it there and don't get it. Because that'll be useful for somebody else. That'll be useful, he says, for the alien and the fatherless and the widow. The alien, so the non-Israelites, and the fatherless, those who don't have fathers, maybe never did, and the widow, somebody who knew what it was like to love someone and be loved by someone, but now they're missing them. God wanted the Israelites to leave those things behind so they could see that somebody was thinking about them. And you think about those three categories, they're categories of people that are often forgotten in a sense. Like the widow, for example, typically gets a lot of attention during the funeral when a person dies, but a month later, 6 months later, 3 years later, they certainly don't hear from quite as many people, but they'd typically love to let them know that they haven't forgotten them. They haven't forgotten their hurt. And the fatherless, individuals who maybe never had what they know is supposed to be an incredibly significant relationship in their life. And then the alien or the stranger, the non-Israelite, the foreigner, somebody that really would have been an afterthought in the minds of so many Israelites. And God was saying, don't let them be an afterthought. Show them that you're thinking about them. And then he gave them the reason why. Not just to be kind to them and to remember them, but as a way that they would show that they remember something else. That they remember that they were slaves in Egypt. That's what God says. After he gives the instructions, he says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt. And what does that have to do with it? Well, when they were slaves, God remembered them. God didn't forget about them. God remembered them even though when they were in Egypt, their lack of trust, their diminishing hope, their failure to think of God, as they look back on those days, I bet they wouldn't have blamed God for wanting nothing to do with them. And yet he did. And that's good news for us. Because whether you've been overlooked, neglected, forgotten about by someone else, or if you wouldn't blame God for just wanting nothing to do with you ever again, well, the good news is that he's already remembered you. He remembered to save you. He remembered to forgive you. He remembered to love you. He remembered to do everything that was necessary to put you in the only family that gets to stay together forever with him. The one that not even death is more powerful than. The one where relationships are healed and whole and perfect. And the one where you are never an afterthought. Not to God. You never were. You never will be. You matter to him. You always will. So rest well tonight, my friends.